Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over the minimum effective dose. Now, I've used my experience as an athlete, I've used my experience coaching leaders, entrepreneurs, high performers, because I want you to do something that complements your life, doesn't work against it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, the minimum effective dose. So we're going to talk about definition and purpose, why less is more, key movement patterns, adapt when life hits, and what it looks like in reality. So, definition and purpose. Let me just start off by saying, I mentioned this in previous videos, but it's so important to go over. Leaders, entrepreneurs, high performers, they have an all or nothing mindset. And this translates into the training so much because I've worked with so many people that want to get after it 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week, and you just can't maintain it. I know some elite athletes, some of the best athletes in the world cannot maintain 7 days a week. So it's got to be structured, it's got to be phased, and it's got to make sense for your life. Low friction training delivers measurable progress with minimal time and stress cost. Efficiency replaces exhaustion. As I've mentioned time and time again, throughout this course, we want the decisions that we're making in terms of our health and fitness to be low friction. We don't want them to be working against our life. That's why it's so important that we have a minimal effective dose that we stick to and it isn't leading to burnout. Essentials over excess. Progress accelerates when you remove the unnecessary and double down on what matters. So if you're training for, I actually don't know of any real training programs that do 7 days a week. All the best ones will usually have at least 2 to 3 days rest in them. But if you're doing 7 days a week, you are not focusing on the right areas and you're probably over focusing on the areas that don't matter. So by dialing it in, we ensure that we're focusing on the stuff that matters and our training has got a lot of purpose to it. Consistency beats volume. Steady input creates discipline. Whoops, just totally read that wrong. Steady input creates more adaptation and then random intensity spikes or long breaks. I'm going to say that again because I absolutely butchered it. Steady inputs create more adaptation than random intensity spikes or long breaks. So again, just like I've mentioned time and time again, if you have a perfect week and you go up and then you have 3 bad ones, let me tell you, that is not as good as having 8 perfect weeks. And forget about training for a second. It's like, life. There's no point in just having a weekend of eating amazing and then you eat terrible for the rest of the month, okay? You're better off eating steadily good rather than excellent in small pockets. Exactly the same with your training. Consistency beats volume. But it's actually strange how much people don't understand this, even though if we're talking about applying these principles to a business sense, it makes total sense. But with our own health and fitness, we have to be retold. And everybody does, by the way. This isn't just you. It isn't just me. I have to relearn these lessons time and time again because when it gets fun, when you start to see the results, the volume ramps up. Sustainability first. A program designed to last. No burnout, no rebound, just repeatable progress. We want something that we can repeat, that's easy, that we don't have to think about. Why less is more? And I'm not just saying this, by the way. Less really is more. I think about this all the time when it comes to people with injuries as well. So the more you train, the more prone you are to becoming injured. Just like the more you drive your car, the more the increased likelihood that you are going to have a crash. Okay, it might not happen, but there's an increased likelihood. And I always think about these athletes that go out the gates hot. They do session after session after session, and they crash and burn or they get injured. Now, if they would have just stayed at a steady pace, building on top of the progress that they'd made, and they'd have been able to train for a much longer duration, let me tell you, those people would be fitter at the end of the year than the people who trained so hard with the intensity and then fell off. Whoops, let me just go back there. So, smarter structure. You don't need more effort, you need clarity that enhances focus, not pressure. Energy economy. Overtraining drains energy and decision-making power, which limits growth. 100%, particularly in business. So A lot of people talk about, you should be more disciplined, you should train more, all the health benefits that come with that, but they rarely talk about the negative effects of overtraining. And forget about doing this over a week or a month. If you're literally looking at this in one session, if you absolutely wreck yourself, you are not going to be able to work properly because your mind's going to be absolutely thrashed as well as your body. So it's important that we're not overtraining, and that the training that we're doing is structured and repeatable so that we can just repeat it. Simplicity scales. As with anything in life, fewer moving parts mean higher adherence and better long-term execution. Again, I've done many programs, I've worked with many coaches, and it's always the simple stuff that is the best. I think sometimes it's very easy to overcomplicate stuff, particularly in health and fitness, and particularly if you're selling something. And my approach has always just been to simplify it. And the hardest workouts, believe it or not, are the ones that don't look as hard. They usually got 2 movements in over 9 or 12 minutes. They're usually the hardest in my experience. Intentional effort. Shorter sessions demand sharper focus. Every rep carries purpose. So, I am a coach, so I train a little bit more than the average person. Now, Monday, Tuesday, my training sessions are extremely long, just over 2 hours at the minute. Am I as focused in those sessions and when I'm doing the high skill stuff as I would be if I'd condensed it into a 45-minute session? The answer is absolutely no. Now, I'm in a fortunate position where training is part of my job. I'm in a gym all the time, and I'm a coach, so the likelihood is that I am going to train more than the average person. But in terms of yourself, if you're not a coach, if you're just a leader in the corporate world or you run your own business, you need a short session that's going to demand all your focus and get all your time and energy. You don't really need to be doing these 2-3 hour slogs where you're just kind of pulling yourself through it. Better to have shorter session, sharper focus. Improve recovery. Adaptation happens between the sessions, not during them. Rest is part of the plan. So, seems really simple, but people miss it. You don't adapt when you're training. All right? So the training, I always look at it like this. You are telling your body that we are now going to be under these increased demands physically, aerobically, anaerobically, and you need to make some new armor. Now that cannot happen in the sessions. It happens when you sleep, which is why there's such a big focus on the sleep and morning routines. And it happens when you're not training. So when we're designing a program, we need to make sure that it's not day after day after day, because where's the body going to adapt? And there's also deload that needs to happen. So even though you're resting between your sessions, there needs to be a week, usually every 4 weeks, where you deload and you take all the impact, all the resistance away, or minimal resistance, should I say. Maybe it's the volume that you take away and you allow the body to recover. Now we're talking. This is one of my favorite subjects, key movement patterns. So if you started the training already, you will have seen some of these, no doubt. The squat, probably the king or the queen of the strength exercises, develops lower body strength, posture and mobility. It is the base of human movement. If you travel around Asia, if you've been around Asia, you'll always see like the Indian and the Asian squat. Those guys just literally stay in that thing, and lo and behold, they have better backs. We love to sit on seats, particularly if you're in the business world. If you're leading your own business, you're going to spend a lot of time sat down. So the squat should be the fundamental part of any program. The hinge pattern protects the spine and builds glute and hamstring power for real world carryover. So if you're used to sitting down, what you'll find, if you haven't got short hamstrings, so you can't touch your toes, you may have lengthened hamstrings, but they're weaker in that position. So they're weakened in a lengthened position. So What that means is that you just won't recruit them as much as you would do if you were perhaps an athlete who is consistently using them. So the hinge pattern is extremely important, particularly those that are sat down a lot. Push and pull. So examples of that include bench press, pull up, okay, balances the upper body, strengthens shoulders, and maintains healthy posture. We don't want to go too far with that. So when you see the guys in particular, I'll pick on the guys a lot because we're the worst offenders by a mile. And maybe you can't say that in 2025, but that's the truth. Guys love a bench press. And that means that you usually find that they're more hunched over, a little bit rounded. That means they can't open. I don't know if you can see this. It means you can't open the shoulder properly and do the things that humans were designed to do. So there's going to be a push and pull focus. Carry and rotate, improve stability, grip, and control through dynamic core engagement. So you'll see this more with a lot of the functional stuff that's coming out. The old school bodybuilding style of training, biceps, triceps, bench press. Some of that's useful, it's still there, but you're going to see a lot of carrying and rotation stuff because that is how, as humans, we're designed to move. So, your session, adapt when life hits. Compress, don't cancel. A shorter version done keeps identity and consistency intact. So, I've never been catastrophically injured, touch wood, or thick plastic desk. But whenever I have a small niggle and it's not going to serve me well to jump in and put more strain through it, I will always do something else. And there is always something that is limiting us from progressing. So myself, because I've spent so long behind a desk in the corporate world, mobility, and in particular, upper thoracic mobility. Now, I can give you a recent example. Recently, I pulled my hamstring while running. So I used it as an opportunity to improve my upper thoracic mobility when I wasn't training. So when I came back to training, I would still have improved. So compress, don't cancel. We're talking about slightly different things here. If you're injured and you picked up a little niggle, you can do something else. In terms of if you are busy, shorten the session, but just make sure you turn up and do something. It's super important. You want to maintain that consistency. Maintain the intensity, cut the volume, reduces sets or rounds, but maintains the intent and the pattern. Now, this is super important, and you will see the further that you go into this program, you will notice that the intensity will get quite high with some of the movements. So back in the day, it used to be who can run the furthest, who was the fittest, or who can run the fastest. But now with the introduction of EMOMs, metabolic conditioning, you can do a much shorter workout, maybe 6 to 8 minutes, and you can really get the heart rate going. So if you haven't got the time, when life's hit, let's cut the volume, maintain the intensity, or increase the intensity. Stay efficient. It's almost like I wrote this, isn't it? Use EMOMs or circuits to stay focused when energy is low. I think bodybuilding is quite tough because I find it quite boring. Traditional bodybuilding, where you're just going in with the aim to get blood pumped into the muscle, I find quite boring. I don't find it stimulating. You can stay super efficient, you can keep it super fun, and you can keep your mind interested by using EMOMs. So EMOM every minute on the minute, or every 2 minutes, or every 5 minutes. You will do certain exercise within certain windows. If you're following my protocol program, you'll understand exactly what this means because there will be some built into your program. But EMOMs are super efficient, great for the end of your workout. And if you're a little bit time limited, which most of you leaders are, these are brilliant. Core lifts and movements first. Prioritize the movements that deliver the biggest return on investment. effort, but I'll say investment. Compound movements. So depending on what program of mine you are on, in terms of the compound movement, you just want to make sure you're getting them done first. What you don't want to be doing is going from an absolute thrashing and then going straight into a compound movement, because that is just, you're not going to be as stable, you're not going to be able to hit the percentages that you've been prescribed, and you're just not going to perform in the way that you would. Now, if you do the compound movement and then go into something like an EMOM, that's totally fine, because the weight's probably not going to be as high and the chances of injury are far less. Momentum over perfection. Progress compounds through consistent action, not flawless execution. Now, I think I've probably said that in one way, shape, or form 10 times. So maybe more. So what does it look like in action? 3 to 4 sessions a week, enough frequency to drive strength and fitness without draining energy or recovery. So I would always advise 3 in the beginning. If you're doing a 4th session, I would make sure that it's a longer format zone 2 workout, so you could comfortably have a conversation with the person next to you and isn't an absolute thrashing. 3 sessions per week for somebody who's busy, who's a high performer, who's got a lot of conflicting priorities is more than enough. And if you can maintain that throughout the year, you're going to get some serious results. Short focused workouts, 30 to 45 minutes that hit strength, mobility, and conditioning together. So the ideal is compound, accessory to those compounds, metabolic conditioning or cardio, whatever that looks like. Flexible framework works anywhere, at home, in a gym, or while traveling, with simple adjustments. You don't want to overcomplicate this with, silly machines and equipment that you might not have. This should be something that if you've got amazing equipment around you, yes, you can use it, but, it should be quite simple. Something that you could, if you really need to, adapt it for a hotel room floor. That simple. Maybe not that simple. You might need to go on a run or use a little bit of an equipment, but you understand what I'm saying. The basic principles and the structure, you may be able to apply it to a hotel room. Built for longevity, it uses low joint stress and smart recovery so you can train consistently all year round. Again, you've got to mix the on-feet conditioning with the off-feet conditioning, because if you don't, your joints are just going to feel absolutely hammered. So, in summary, that was quick. I think I just really enjoyed speaking about that one, because now we're really getting into it. This is one of my favourite topics, training and the execution. So we spoke about definition and purpose, what it is, why we do it, why less is more, key movement patterns, adapting when life hits, and what it looks like in reality. You're making excellent progress. If you've got any questions at all, give me a shout. Well done.